I was told to bring the fire today. Luke, the reading is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verses 49 through 56. And this is Jesus talking here. I've come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already ablaze. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what constraint I am under until it is completed. Do you think that I've come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one house. From now on, 5 in one house will be divided. 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. They will be divided. Father against son and son against father, mother against daughter and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you immediately say it's going to rain, and so it happens. And when you see the south winds blowing, you say there will be scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites! You know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? May the Lord add a blessing to this reading.
Thank you, Anne. This passage, my goodness, this is not... I didn't even start yet, okay? Troublemakers in the front row. That's fine. That's fine. We'll be fine. Thank you. Well, anybody else get uncomfortable when they see this reading? This is not exactly the Jesus that you're used to seeing or maybe prepared to see when we're reading from the Gospels. In fact, we just sang a song in which we referred to Jesus as the Prince of Peace, right? And then Jesus says, I did not come to bring peace. And I was like, well, what? It's like actually your name. What on earth are you talking about? I've heard this passage in Matthew used many times incorrectly, in which he says, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Right? When anytime I talk about my pacifist views and how it comes from Jesus, and they go, what? Jesus said he didn't come to bring peace. He came to bring weaponry. That's what he said. He came to bring fire, right? He wanted to call down fire on earth is what it said. Oh, how I wish it was already kindled, right? What kind of frightening imagery. Imagine one of us. Imagine me standing here right now like, my God, did you see the news? I cannot wait to burn this country down. You'd be like, dude, I think you need a nap and a nice carb-filled meal, and then go take a nap in an air-conditioned room for a while, and you'll be fine. But Jesus is tapping into something much more ancient. He is not inventing this language. He is using a well-known prophetic language. Remember a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the book of Amos and how Amos used this language that was so inflammatory that when I took it and translated it with modern names and places and dates and whatnot, it got banned from Facebook for being too violent and incendiary. Like, Jesus is borrowing from that tradition because Jesus knows that peace does not mean calm. We say, oh, we want some peace and quiet, as if those are the same things. But peace, as Dr. King said, is not the absence of tension, but rather the presence of justice. In fact, in lots of ways, in lots of times, if there is a lack of tension, that ends up not being peaceful. What that does is it just keeps those in power and keeps those who are oppressed oppressed. It does nothing to actually create real and lasting peace. So when Jesus says, I did not come to bring peace, I don't think he's talking about shalom, the concept of wholeness and rightness and goodness that's so deeply embedded in Judaism. I think he's saying, I didn't come to bring comfort. I didn't come to bring easy answers. I didn't come to bring nice, easy answers for everyone. I came to speak truth. And truth has this funny way of dividing people, doesn't it? You will instantly know who your friends are when you start talking your truth, when you start speaking your deepest truth. Who sticks around? And sometimes we need people in the world who are not afraid to set some things on fire for the right reasons. Okay? I'm thinking about, we're just in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm thinking about how important wildfires are as in the ecology of the Pacific Northwest and in some other places that many species of tree, including the giant sequoia, will not open their seed pods unless they are on fire. And that they have evolved to require fire in order to make new life. That sometimes you need to burn away what is old and dead in order to create something new. You can't just log the whole area and then plant new things and expect everything to work out the way it's supposed to. Sometimes nature requires destruction in order to create something better. So I want to introduce to you today a friend of mine who I have been spending a lot of time with for the past couple of months in my day job. For those of you who don't know, I am the host and producer of the Quaker Podcast, which is a Quaker podcast. I'm not a Quaker, but they hired me to... It's specifically because I'm not a Quaker, and I don't know all their insider language. And things like this are interesting to me because I haven't grown up learning about them. But there is a man that I imagine most of you have not heard of, named Benjamin Lay. Anybody here know who Benjamin Lay is? Aside from through me, anybody ever heard this guy's name? He's making a bit of a revival right now on TikTok. They call him Benjamin Slay. Because Gen Z is fabulous. But I want to introduce you to somebody who exemplifies this kind of fire better than almost anybody that I have heard about in recent years. Benjamin Lay was an abolitionist, a vegetarian, a feminist, and an anti-capitalist before any of those things were words, okay? This man was born in 1682, okay? He was born in England. He grew to be about 4 feet tall, so he had dwarfism, but he also had a hunched back and a broad chest due to a secondary condition whose name I don't remember. And his biographer said that he had legs that were so thin, it was a wonder that they supported his body. So this is not a mistake of the author right here. I mean, the artist right here. He really had these itty-bitty legs and a giant torso, walking around at about 4 feet tall. And he, as an early age, his dad set him up to be a glover, as you do in those days, but could not stand the fact that a part of that meant that he had to kill animals and he had to work with their flesh. And he felt that he was brothers with all living things and that he couldn't take another life. So he decided not to eat meat and not to wear leather and not to work in any industry that required him to work in exploitative ways with other living creatures. Can you imagine this in the 1600s? Somebody having that kind of conviction? You think that's the sort of thing that now people in developed countries who are, enlightened and we have our synthetic products and everything that we can do. But here he was, his convictions being absolute. And so instead he became a sailor, as one does. And a part of that, he saw the world. And he saw all of the evils in the world. And he got married. to a woman named Sarah, and Sarah also had dwarfism. So the two of them became this amazing, wonderful couple in the British Quaker community, and they got some money together, and they moved to Barbados to open up a shop. Imagine, this is the dream, right? He's going to move to the Caribbean. He's got his wife. They love each other. They're going to open up a little mom and pop shop, and they're going to just sell good things and live in the Caribbean. And they get there, and what they find instead is the most horrible place in which just thousands of enslaved Africans die every single day. For what? For sugar. For something the human body does not even need to survive. It is a luxury good. It is something that makes tea taste better. It's something that you can make cake with, so you don't have to mess with bees. It is the most atrocious, horrible thing that humans have done in the last 1,000 years. And for what? And he could not wrap his mind around how not only were humans capable of this kind of atrocity, but that Quakers were capable of this kind of atrocity. Of all people, because Quakers have this core founding principle. At the core of everything that they believe is that there is that of God in everyone. Right? That's a George Fox quote. There is that of God in everyone, which means nobody is more special than another. They've done away with hierarchy. We're all on the same level. And so therefore, if you believe that, how could you possibly enslave another human? And not only how could you enslave another human, because, okay, granted, there's 100,000 years of culture and tradition telling you that it's okay to enslave another human. How can you treat them this poorly, that they come into his shop and pass out on the floor because they haven't eaten in days? And that he starts subverting the system. He starts trying to teach these people to read. He starts sneaking them food. He starts getting in trouble with local plantation owners because he just cannot stand idly by while his people do this. And that's the thing that makes Benjamin the most mad. Not just that wicked people do wicked things, but that his people who should know better are doing it. I've found this to be true with prophets. Prophets get the most angry at their own people. And also the most discouraged, by the way. Like, a prophet can fight against evil all day long, 24 hours a day. Yep, I'm mad at the system. I'm going to fight the system. I'm going to burn it all down. But what makes a prophet burn out is when their people don't catch the fire. When their people that they think should know better, that we believe the same thing, we're from the same people, why are we not on the same page? When that happens, it can destroy a person. And so he and his wife, they decided, you know what? This is our life now. Any idea we had before about making a life for ourselves and making money and having a comfortable life, having seen what we have seen of the horrors of colonial America, we cannot enjoy luxury ever again. And so they move to beautiful Abington, Pennsylvania, just up the road, about an hour from here. And because they don't want to be a part in any aspect of any industry that exploits and causes suffering of either human or natural, like animal suffering, they live in a cave. Okay? There it is, right there. That's in Abington as well. This has been built up because there's a road there now. They built a little like wooden thing that came out. There was a room in front of it, but it was minimal. And it was something they could construct themselves with hand tools and trees that they felled around them. They did not wear cotton. Cotton came from the enslaved persons. They got their own hemp, and they spun it themselves, and they created their own clothing because they did not want to be a part in any way, shape, or form with any industry that may exploit people or animals. They were vegetarians. They ate only what they grew themselves or that they could confirm came from a farmer that had no cruelty towards animals. You see this sort of very modern way of thinking. We talk now about supply chains, right, and about ethical consumerism and figuring out, is my coffee fair trade, and where did my chocolate come from, and all of that. This is 300 years ago, and they're having the same conversations then as we are now, recognizing that it's not enough to simply not own humans and mistreat them. But if you are purchasing products that help support that industry, you are a part of it. So Benjamin is a wild man, okay? Because he's tried the diplomatic route. He has tried standing up. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Quaker meetings, their services are a lot quieter than these. They get together, they sit in a circle, there's no pastor, there's no music, there might be some announcements at the beginning, but then they all sit in contemplative silence, waiting for the Spirit of God to move in them, and then somebody to offer a vocal ministry to those who are there, or not. Plenty of times, nothing is spoken. And so plenty of times, Benjamin will have stood up and done the way you're supposed to do it, and said, "My brothers and sisters in Christ, how is it that we can sit by idly and watch while human lives are destroyed? How can we see that of God in everyone and still dehumanize entire continent of people? How can we claim to be those who are bearers of the image of God and yet denounce it in everything else?" And his people said, "Oh, you're right. That's troubling. Anyway, when is tea?" And it's that sort of nothingness response from his own people that drives him insane. And some would say he is insane, because he then, having read through all of the Bible and being inspired by the prophets of the Old Testament and Jesus in passages like this one, starts making these outward, visible signs, what he called apocalyptic theater. By that, I mean he would do things like... he showed up at a meeting with 3 tobacco pipes, and he went around and he smashed them in front of people and threw tobacco all over the place and had these words to say, both about how you who are buying and smoking tobacco are destroying the lives of enslaved people in the South, in Virginia especially, but also destroying your own health. Right? He's over here like smoking causes cancer in the 1600s. He wouldn't have used those words. They would have probably had some other word about bad air and lungs and coughing and all of that. They didn't know what COPD was. When his wife died in 1735, he got a little bit more extreme, because Sarah was somebody who could temper him down. She was a quiet person. She was never disowned. She was actually given license to preach all over the place as an abolitionist. He was disowned from 4 different meetings. And so after she died, he got a little wild and crazy. He published a book. Benjamin Franklin published it for him. Let me read you the title of this book. You ready? You ready? This is 1738. Okay? 1738. 150 years or so before the Emancipation Proclamation. The title of his book: "All slave keepers that keep the innocent in bondage, apostates, pretending to lay claim to the pure and holy Christian religion of what congregation soever, but especially in their ministers, by whose example the filthy leprosy and apostasy is spread far and near. It is a notorious sin which many of the true friends of Christ and his pure truth called Quakers have been for many years and still are concerned to write and bear testimony against, as a practice so gross and hurtful to religion and destructive to government beyond what words can set forth or can be declared by men or angels, and yet live by ministers and magistrates in America." Right? Some good search engine optimization keywords in there, obviously. Actually, Benjamin Franklin looked at his manuscript and he said, "What even is this? What's the order? This is just a jumble of thoughts." And Benjamin Lay said, "You put it whatever order makes sense to you. I'm off to go do something else." He was quite a guy. At one point, he took his late wife's precious tea set. Okay, when I say it's China, I mean it comes from China. It was like, the one luxury good that they owned. And he went down to the market on Market Street in Philadelphia, and he set up a table, and he laid them all out one by one. And then he took a hammer, and he smashed one. And he said, "You who drink tea and use sugar are drinking the blood of the enslaved people in India who pick your tea, and in Barbados who pick your sugar cane. You may not own people, smash, but you are drinking the blood of your fellow humans, smash. You will likewise, the Lord will spread your blood on the streets of Philadelphia, and it will run red with the blood of slave owners, smash. Because by this point, half of all Quakers in Pennsylvania owned slaves, okay? This is a big deal. A lot of them at this point, because they'd done very well for themselves. So he's over here smashing his wife's fine china and talking about this really important issue. And the people around him are horrified. Not by his language, but by the fact that he's breaking teacups. And so a team of men tackle him and carry him away on their shoulders, because again, he's 4 feet tall. And a group of other people rescue the rest of the tea set. And that's how it's recorded in the newspaper, is like, oh, thank God we saved the rest of the tea set. Completely missing the point of the protest entirely. At another point, he laid down in front of the doorway, so anybody who left the meeting had to walk over his body, and he pretended to be dead. Another time, he walked in the snow barefoot, and all of his friends are like, Benjamin, you're going to get frostbite. How could you? It's so freezing. And he goes, oh, now you care. How about the slaves in your fields? Do you care about how they're dressed? I don't think you do. At one point, he invited his neighbor's son, bringing him in with candy, to his cave, where he had him, playing with toys and coloring and whatnot. And when the kid's parents freaked out because they couldn't find their child, he said to them, oh, here's your child. He was with me. But you were pretty scared, right? How do you think the parents of the girl that works in your household feels after she was ripped away from her family? And maybe his most famous of all actions took place in 1738, in which he walked the 40 miles from Abington to Burlington, New Jersey. Again, because he's not going to ride a horse, because he doesn't want to burden anyone else. So he walks 40 miles to the Philadelphia yearly meeting, which for Quakers is like the business meeting for everyone. And Philadelphia yearly meeting is the biggest one in America, in the colonies. All of the famous, rich, and powerful people are there. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court's there. Like, everybody is there, okay? And he shows up, and everybody looks, and he's just there in his coat. It's middle of winter. But everybody knows he's going to do something, because it's who he is. So everybody, I think, is waiting. During this sort of quiet, calm time, I don't think anybody is actually praying. I think everybody's just giving the side eye to Benjamin. So Benjamin stands up, and they go, okay, here we go. And he says, oh, all you Negro masters who are contentedly holding your fellow creatures in a state of slavery during life, well knowing the cruel sufferings these innocent captives undergo in their state of bondage, and especially you who profess to do unto all men as ye would have them do unto you, you might as well throw off the plain coat as I do, as in, like, show your true colors. And he throws off his coat, and underneath, he's wearing a military outfit, which Quakers are pacifists. That's a big deal. And not only that, but he's got a sword. And he pulls out a sword out of his scabbard. And everybody is like, whoa, this is a place of peace. We do not bring weapons into a place of peace. And he holds up a book. And some say it was a Bible. Some say it was the Quaker Book of Discipline. It was a book everybody knew. And he took his sword and he said, thus shall the Lord spill the blood of those slave owners who are here today. And he stabbed the book, which he had hollowed out and filled with a bladder of pokeberry juice, which then exploded in red fake blood all over the rich, powerful, slave-owning Quakers that were seated in the front row in front of him. Now, they didn't know it was pokeberry juice. It looks like blood, and it stains like blood. I don't know if anybody's tried to pull pokeberry, but it stains. And everybody screams and they run in terror that this crazy man with a weapon has now stabbed a Bible and shot blood all over everyone. Nobody knows where the blood came from. So again, they pick him up and they throw him out. Though there are some recent documents that have unearthed that tell a different story, that a large group of people from that meeting went with him out after that display. That was enough for them. They could not go back and sit business as usual. And they went with him down to the Delaware River, where they ritually cleaned the sword and prayed for the future and the soul of America. Right? Now, Benjamin died he died in 17, sorry. He's still alive. He died in 1759, which, as anybody here who knows anything about history knows, he did not see abolition. However, in 1758, about 18 months before he died, the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting made it illegal for their members to participate in the slave trade. Now, if they already owned a person, they could keep that person, because change happens slowly in power and economy and all of that. But it was the first step. It was the very first time that any religious body in the colonies made any kind of move towards abolition. The very first time. And it was enough for him, because he knew that once the crack in the dam formed, it was only a matter of time. And that his lifetime of fighting against the system, he wouldn't live to see it, but he knew what was coming. He was like Moses, standing on the mountaintop, looking out at the promised land, knowing he wouldn't step in there, but that his children would. And so I've been drawn to this guy. He's actually there'll be an episode next Tuesday coming out about him. He's the center of our whole season. We had this art commissioned. It's a woodcut art commissioned of him, stabbing the Bible. And the artist put his hand out as if to say, now what will you do? Because this is the only portrait of him, by the way. And fun story, this is Benjamin Franklin's wife had this commissioned because he was good friends with the family. But the man would never sit for a portrait because he's too humble. And so she went to the portrait artist and she said, I really want a portrait of my friend Benjamin Lay, but he won't sit for one. And the portrait artist went, oh, that guy? I have seen him in the marketplace enough to know him from memory. I could see him in my sleep. And so he painted this from memory, just from being annoyed with the guy all the time, because he would not stop. Which I love that. That's perfect, right? But in thinking about these sorts of people, these kinds of people that turn the world upside down, that cause necessary tension in order to cause systems to look in on themselves and grow and change and become closer to God's justice. What I want to warn us is to not idolize people from the past. Like, I just told you all this story of this guy, and we're all here like, yeah, we would be there, Team Benjamin Lay. We would be there, like, cheering this guy on and, giving him some water so that he can keep screaming. But I'm not sure any of us actually would. Dr. King, for all we quote about him, and for all the streets named after him, and for the federal holiday that he gets, the year he died, he had 75% of Americans disapproved of him. 75% of Americans in 1968 disapproved of him. 31% of Americans after his assassination believed that he brought it on himself. But time justified him. And then many of us look back on that time and we think that's where we would be. We would be with the good guys because, Jesus is mad at the same people that I'm mad at, which, by the way, is how you know you've made God in your own image. when God hates the same people that you do. So I would caution us. Not to imagine ourselves on the right side of history, but to think realistically about where we are standing now. I heard somebody tell me that they wish they lived in the 1960s because they totally would have been right in the middle of the civil rights movement. There's nothing to fight for anymore these days. And was like, I don't think you would be there in the 1960s. I think you probably would be at home going, man, I support these people, but their tactics are just too extreme. I am all for peaceful protest, but I draw the line at property destruction. Oh, these hooligans are looting stores when they're destroying our message about, right? You'd be saying the same thing in the 60s that you're saying now. And that's a humble place to have to stand, because I think I probably would not be standing with Benjamin Lay. I think I probably would be like, I'm with you on your message, but we need to work on your delivery. I think if I lived in Jesus's day, I would have been more like maybe a liberal Pharisee and been like, wow, Jesus has some good points, but he's a little bit too extreme for me. I'm being honest with you. I'm an ordained clergy. Jesus didn't attract a whole lot of very religious people. It was usually the people in the margins that were attracted to Jesus and are typically attracted to these revolutionary figures. And it's only after the fact that we adopt them. Jesus said that to the Pharisees. He said, your fathers and grandfathers killed the prophets that you now preach. And so I wonder, friends, what needs disruption today? What systems do we need to shake? Where do we need to create tension so that justice might be truly known? What are we maybe too comfortable with? What, like slavery, is maybe we think of as just a necessary evil that will never go away? And where are you feeling convicted? Where are you feeling called? What is stirring up within your heart?